Hello again, this is Alister McGrath, and I'm speaking to you from Oxford about one of the city and university's most interesting Christian writers, C.S. Lewis. And in the previous presentation, I introduced you to the Chronicles of Narnia, pointing out some of the themes we encounter in this famous set of novels. Now, in this second presentation about Narnia, I want to talk about Aslan, the noble lion who plays a pivotal role in Narnia, just as Jesus Christ is central to the Christian faith. Now, we mustn't simply identify Aslan with Christ, but Lewis wants us to see a close relationship between them. Aslan helps us to think about Jesus Christ by engaging our imagination as much as informing our reason. In one sense, Aslan is an imaginative surrogate for Jesus Christ, helping us to begin a more serious engagement with the place of Christ in the Christian life. Lewis doesn't tell us what Jesus Christ is like. He shows us what Aslan is like and allows us to make the links for ourselves. Aslan is a character of such imaginative and spiritual depth that many readers of Narnia find themselves drawn to him for reasons they sometimes find difficult to put into words. And Lewis clearly wants us to see Aslan as a Christ figure. He wants us to reflect on what he called as supposal. Lewis put it like this. Listen to what he says. Let us suppose that there were a land like Narnia, that the Son of God, as he became a man in our world, became a lion there, and then imagine what would happen. So suppose God did decide to become incarnate in a world like Narnia. How would that work out? What would it look like? What would it feel to be part of this world or to encounter Aslan? Now, the most characteristic and I think striking feature of Lewis's depiction of Aslan is that he is a figure who evokes awe and wonder. And Lewis develops this theme with relation to Aslan by emphasizing the fact that Aslan is wild, not tame. He's an awe-inspiring, magnificent creature which has not been tamed through domestication or had his claws pulled out to ensure he's powerless. As Mr. Beaver whispered to the children, he's wild, you know, not like a tame lion. And throughout the Chronicles of Narnia, Aslan is portrayed as a magnificent living animal who has a profound effect on those he meets. When Aslan's name is mentioned for the first time, the 4 children, Lewis tells us, felt quite different. Edmund felt a mysterious horror. Peter felt brave and adventurous. Susan felt elated. And Lucy got the feeling you have when you realize it's the beginning of the holidays. There's clearly something special about Aslan, something it's difficult to put into words. And this, of course, is a classic theological problem. The recognition that human language just cannot do justice to the complexity or richness of either God or Christ. Aslan overwhelms the children's ability to understand him. They simply cannot take him in. No matter how hard they try, they can only grasp so much of his nature and purposes. Aslan's good, but he's not tame. And the children learn to respect and trust him, even though they don't fully understand him. Yet as they get to know him better, they seem to be drawn into a deeper understanding of who he is and why he's significant. Each of the children experience Aslan in their own special way. And Aslan encounters and transforms people individually. And it's easy to see Lewis's allusions to the gospel narrative of the encounters between Christ and individuals like Zacchaeus. Their world is turned upside down by this stranger who seems to know everything about him. But Lewis also uses the figure of Aslan to challenge the atheist argument that God is simply a wish fulfillment. Now, this argument is especially associated with Sigmund Freud, who holds we simply invent God as a way of giving ourselves meaning and significance. For Freud, God is simply an imagined father who we invent because we need security. It's sometimes called the projection theory because it suggests we project the image of God onto an imaginary screen of the world. So how does Lewis deal with this question? To find the answer, we turn to the silver chair, one of the most interesting of the Chronicles of Narnia. The plot of the silver chair is a bit like a Mission Impossible movie. Puddleglum, who's a mildly depressed marshwiggle, Jill Pole and Eustace Scrubb are sent to Narnia to rescue a Narnian prince from his captivity. And this prince is being held against his will by the ruler of the underworld in a dark subterranean cavern. And the Queen tries to persuade the Narnians they are deluded about this overworld they keep talking about. Her underground kingdom is the only reality. They've simply invented the idea of the overworld. The Narnian prince protests. There really is an overworld. It's not like this dark underground kingdom. It has a sun. So the Queen invites him to tell her more about this so-called sun. Looking around, the prince sees a lamp and says, the sun's just like that lamp. Listen to this. You see that lamp? It's round and yellow and gives light to the whole room and hangs moreover from the roof. Now that thing we call the sun is like the lamp, only far greater and brighter. It gives light to the whole overworld and hangeth in the sky. And the Queen laughs dismissively. Ha! There is no sun. The prince has simply invented the idea best on the lamp. So the Queen says, your sun is a dream, and there's nothing in that dream that wasn't copied from the lamp. The lamp's the real thing. The sun's but a tale, a children's story. Anyway, what does this sun hang from? And that stumps the prince. So Jill now enters the conversation. What about Aslan? He's part of the real world outside the cave, isn't he? Again, the Queen ridicules Jill's intervention. Jill has merely invented the lion, just as the prince merely invented the sun. Aslan is just a big imaginary cat, just like the sun is a big imaginary lamp. So listen to the Queen's words. You've seen cats, and now you want a bigger and better cat, and so it's to be called a lion. Everything in your make-believe world has just been copied from the real world, the world of the underworld, which is the only real world. Finally, Puddleglum, Jill, Eustace and the Narnian prince are able to make their escape to the overworld, the real world. And they realize it's not an illusion. But the important point about this passage is not just the answer that Lewis gives. There is a real world beyond this imaginary world. Let's focus down on his approach and appreciate his wisdom. Lewis rebuts the projection theory by telling a story, and the appeal of his approach lies primarily with the imagination, not with reason. We grasp Lewis's point through our imagination, and our reason struggles to keep up. In effect, Lewis's narrative subverts Freud's account of the origins of our belief in God by showing that the seemingly sophisticated argument is actually rather shallow and superficial. So how does he do this? Lewis's readers know there is a sun. They can easily imagine the scenario of an underground realm, especially if they've read Plato, from whom Lewis borrowed this image. And they can just as easily imagine someone who's been imprisoned within this world all their lives and think that the underground kingdom is the only reality. Knowing the reality, we can smile at the superficial plausibility of the argument that the sun is simply an illusion copied from the lamp. And Lewis helps us to see that atheist writers like Sigmund Freud present their speculative theories as if they were self-evident truths. Only a fool, Freud suggests, would think there is a God. So Lewis helps us to see it in the first place, this approach is only a theory, not a fact. And secondly, it's not actually a particularly plausible theory. It's just one way of looking at things, which is what the word theory really means, and there are other and better ways of looking at things. Lewis's story gives us another way of looking at this projection theory, which makes us realize it's far more vulnerable than we might otherwise have realized. Well, I hope you enjoyed that brief exploration of Narnia. There's much more needs to be said, but we haven't got time. So let's look at Lewis on apologetics in more detail in the next presentation, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.